They thought they were safe. Israel had just won 2 major wars. But on October 6, 1973, everything changed. 2 nations launched a surprise attack that almost erased Israel from the map. This is the story of the Yom Kippur War, a war that began with complete surprise and ended with the world on the edge of nuclear disaster. It's a war of tanks, betrayal, failed intelligence, political backstabbing, and one of the deadliest battles the Middle East has ever seen. And the aftermath? It shaped the future of Arab-Israeli relations forever. Let's break it all down. By 1973, Israel had been riding high after their shocking victory in the 1967 Six-Day War. They had tripled their territory. They now controlled the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. But this created a massive problem. Humiliation in the Arab world. Egypt and Syria had lost huge parts of their land. For Egypt, losing the Sinai was a national trauma. For Syria, losing the Golan Heights was like a slap in the face. And to make things worse, Israel didn't seem interested in giving anything back. Peace negotiations? Barely moving. So Egypt and Syria came to a conclusion. If diplomacy won't work, war will. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat had a plan. But it wasn't just about land, it was about pride. Sadat wanted to shock the world. He named the mission Operation Badr, after a famous early Islamic battle. Here's how it would work. 1. Launch a surprise attack across the Suez Canal. 2. Overwhelm the thin Israeli defense line, known as the Bar Lev Line. 3. Dig in before Israel could counterattack. But Egypt couldn't do it alone. At the same time, Syrian President Hafez al-Assad planned to retake the Golan Heights. Together, Egypt and Syria synchronized their attacks. The date? October 6, 1973. Yom Kippur, the holiest day in Judaism. Perfect timing. Most Israelis were fasting. The army was unprepared. Many soldiers were at home, with their families, off duty. At exactly 2 p.m., over 200 Egyptian jets screamed across the sky. They bombed Israeli positions all along the canal. At the same time, 2,000 tanks and 100,000 soldiers crossed the Suez. Israeli troops? Totally overwhelmed. In the north, Syria launched a full-scale assault on the Golan Heights. In just hours, they captured key areas. Israel's line was cracking. For the first time since 1948, Israel was genuinely on the defensive. How did Israel not see this coming? It turns out, they did. But they ignored it. Israel's top intelligence agency, Amman, had received clear warnings days before the attack. But they believed the Arab armies weren't ready. They thought Sadat was bluffing. Even when a high-level Egyptian informant warned them, Israel still dismissed it. Why? Because of something called the concept. Israeli intelligence had a fixed belief. Arab states wouldn't go to war unless they could win. It was arrogance. And it nearly cost them everything. For the first 72 hours, Israel was in chaos. Their air force couldn't fly freely. Egyptian and Syrian forces had brought in Soviet SAM missiles that shot down dozens of Israeli planes. Thousands of Israeli soldiers were pinned down. In the Golan, Israeli tank crews were fighting wave after wave of Syrian armor. Some units ran out of ammo. Others were destroyed completely. In one battle, a single Israeli tank held off an entire Syrian brigade for hours. But Israel was bleeding. Then, the tide began to turn. On October 9, Israel launched a massive counterattack in the Golan. They pushed back the Syrians inch by inch, reclaiming lost ground. In the Sinai, it was tougher. Egyptian forces had dug in deep. But then came Ariel Sharon, the controversial general, with a bold idea. He proposed crossing the Suez Canal behind enemy lines, trapping the Egyptian Third Army. It was risky. But it worked. On October 15, Israeli forces crossed the canal and cut deep into Egyptian territory. Within days, they were just 100 kilometers from Cairo. At the same time, they surrounded 20,000 Egyptian troops. Egypt's proud offensive was now a trapped force on the brink of collapse. By this point, the war wasn't just an Arab-Israeli conflict. It had become a global crisis. The US backed Israel. The Soviet Union backed Egypt and Syria. And when Israel surrounded the Egyptian Third Army, the Soviets threatened to intervene. The US went on nuclear alert. DEFCON 3. For a few terrifying hours, the world stood on the edge of nuclear war, all because of a desert battle in the Middle East. On October 25, under heavy US and Soviet pressure, a ceasefire was declared. The war lasted just 19 days, but in that time, over 20,000 people died. Thousands more were wounded. Tanks littered the desert. Cities grieved. And families across 3 countries were shattered. Israel had won, but just barely. The country had believed it was invincible after 1967. Now it knew otherwise. The army was overconfident. The intelligence services had failed. It forced Israel to rethink everything, especially how it viewed its neighbors. Even though Egypt didn't win militarily, Sadat got what he wanted: respect and leverage. He proved that Egypt could hurt Israel. And that opened the door for peace talks. 6 years later, in 1979, Egypt became the first Arab country to sign a peace treaty with Israel. Sadat won the Nobel Peace Prize, but lost his life in the process. He was assassinated in 1981 by extremists in his own military. Unlike Egypt, Syria never made peace. They lost even more ground after the war. To this day, the Golan Heights remains under Israeli control. And for Syria, the 1973 war is still a source of pain and unresolved anger. The Arab states had another strategy: oil. During the war, they launched the oil embargo against the US and Europe. Gas prices skyrocketed. Lines stretched for miles. It shocked the West and showed just how powerful oil politics could be. The Yom Kippur War changed everything. It exposed the limits of power. It revealed the dangers of overconfidence. It showed that even the strongest militaries can be blindsided. It almost triggered a world war. And in the end, it forced enemies to become negotiators. It's a war that still echoes today in every peace deal, every ceasefire, and every border dispute in the Middle East. Watch our next video and subscribe for more untold stories from history.